for the organization. So that brings us to, how can we leverage technology? How can we use it effectively? How can we have the way that we present ourselves really be a part of our brand? How can we think about establishing and building credibility in the way that we present ourselves online? And for you all, this is a really exciting opportunity as digital natives, right? You're working remotely in teams. And if you can dedicate the time to really learn how to use the tools effectively, you can set yourself apart as a leader, right? And as a resource for an organization. So if you leave this conversation with anything today, I really want to leave you with just play. Play with the tools, play with the software, learn it. Be the person that teaches other people how to do things. I just did a workshop on Tuesday with Dolores, and I utilized breakout rooms, right? I utilized polling. I had never done those things before, and I learned that, oh, when I do a breakout room, but I'm sharing my screen, it's hard to do both, right? I have a dual monitor setup. I have to minimize the screen that I'm sharing in order to play with the polls. And really right now, this time, while you're in school, while you're in a program, this is the time for you to mess up and for you to not use the technology well, but for you to learn how to become proficient with the tools. So that's really the major takeaway from today, is I want you all to not shy away from the software. I want you to, embrace your personalities and your age and your tech savviness. And I want you to learn all these tools. Learn Microsoft Teams, learn WebEx, learn Zoom, learn Skype, and become really great at them. I learned how to use breakout rooms by just Googling Zoom breakout rooms and then watching Zoom tutorials. And all of the information is out there. It's just a matter of you dedicating the time to making it a priority to be proficient at these tools. So here are the things that I want to cover today. There's three specific pieces that I want us to focus on. So how do you establish credibility? How do you frame yourself well and light yourself well so that you're presenting yourself best on camera? Essentially, how do you look good? How do you look good on camera? The next piece is, again, how can you use all these tools like polling, breakout rooms? There's a whiteboard function. And then how do you communicate to people in these virtual meetings exactly how you want them to engage? So whether that's, please turn your cameras on because I want this to be interactive. I want to see your smiling faces, right? Or it's, please make sure you mute yourself upon meeting entry because that's distracting. How do you set the norms effectively so that people know how to engage with you and there isn't a sense of discomfort because they're unclear as to exactly what it is that you want them to be doing? So I'm going to launch a poll, and I'm going to ask you all, why are you here? Why are you here? What do you want me to focus on? Should I focus on how to look good on camera? Do you want me to focus on how to use breakout rooms and polls? Or do you want me to focus on how do you communicate expectations and norms up front to your group so that they know exactly what they can expect? Where do you want me to spend the majority of my time? And I ask you this question, and I also want to be clear that I would like this to be kind of a more unstructured conversation. So those of you who came to the workshop on Tuesday, there were like 7 panelists. We had we were really tight on time. It was really structured and organized. That's not what today is like. I really want this to be more of a back and forth and more of a conversation. So it looks like the majority of you, I'm going to end the poll. I've got 9, 10, 11 responses out of the 13 people that are here, 12 responses. And it looks like the majority are interested in Zoom tools. So the tools that are available to you in Zoom. So I won't spend a ton of time on how to look good on camera, but I do have slides that speak to all 3 of these things. But this tells me where to spend the majority of my time. I'm going to share the results with you all. So that's one of the first settings is polls. So I just launched the poll. I can see the results on my end real time. I don't see individual people in terms of who's answering in what way. I can see that after the meeting. So since I'm recording the meeting, when I get all the files from the meeting, I will see how people responded individually. But for right now, I can just see the numbers and the percentages. just so you know how that works. All right. So let's talk a little bit about lighting and framing. This is really important, critical, because it really establishes the way that you're perceived, right? Are you being seen as professional? Are you being seen as immature? Are you being seen as credible? And there's 2 tips I want to leave you with in terms of how to light yourself effectively and how to frame yourself in the camera frame. So you want to have what we call a 3-point lighting system set up. That is 3 lights, okay, in order for you to be seen best. So there's a light that's going to be in front of you. That is your key, what we call your key light. It's not any special type of light, but it's the key. It's the one that is putting the most light on your face. And I'll show you a picture of my setup so you'll see what that light is. My key light is a desk lamp. So I can kind of like see the LEDs in the lamp, like the light is really bright on my face. And I'm actually gonna turn off all my lights and only leave my key light on so you can see what the key light does. So I'm gonna this is my fill light that I'm turning off. I have a lot of junk on my desk. And this is my, what we call the backlight that I'm gonna turn off. Okay, so like I mentioned, the key light is the one that's putting the most light on my face. But what you can notice in the way that I come across now is that there's a shadow, right? And so the way that we fill that shadow is what we call the fill light. So oftentimes most people only have 1 light source, and so half of their face is shadowed. So you want to have 2 lighting sources. The key light is the main one. The fill light fills in all of the shadows. What the backlight does now is it separates me from the background so that I stand out a bit. So I'll turn on my backlight. So the backlight is one that can be hard to like have a light behind you, but then not have it in the frame or in the shot. So you don't want to be backlit necessarily, but what I have is a small clip light that's on my bookshelf. So it's a clip light, like a desk lamp, but it's at the bottom of my bookshelf. So it's coming from below and behind me. So that's the 3-point lighting setup. So this is a screenshot I took of our workshop the week prior to last week. And you can see how you can tell that there's a clear line around me. That's because I'm using the backlight. You can see that I'm pretty well lit. That's because I'm, again, using that fill light and the key light. Daniel is backlit, so he only has the backlight, right? But then he's really dark in the face because he's not using a key light. Maria is really washed out because she's only primarily using that key light, right? And which is what we often do, is we use natural light as the key light source. But you really want to have 2 lights set up so that it's not just the key light glaring in your face. Any questions about this lighting setup? These are some of my students. One of the students on the bottom row, like really dark, really poorly lit. You know, who's doing this well? I'd say the student in the top 3rd row isn't poorly lit. She's got both the key light and the fill light, but she doesn't have that backlight. On the bottom left, again, he doesn't have this backlight, so he's kind of blending into the background. And so just so you can see my setup right now, this is my key light up front on the top left. Bottom right is my fill light, and then the backlight is clipped to my bookshelf. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Feel free to just speak up and interrupt me, unmute yourself. Any thoughts about lighting? This is just a basic 3-point lighting setup. It's used in cinema, it's used in theater, it's used by photographers, a way to light yourself effectively. All right, I don't want to spend too much time on this because, as you all mentioned, this isn't necessarily what you want the focus to be, but take some time to just play with this, right? Play with several lamps, play with a setup, rather than just defaulting to, you know, your natural light. So natural light is great, and it can be dangerous. A cloud can pass, right? And it can completely change the mood that you want to convey. you know, you might have to close your door because your dog starts barking, or, you know, there's some sort of thing that happens that has to change the lighting. So just try to take control of your lighting. I noticed some of you are using virtual backgrounds. In the workshop on Tuesday, Jason Hutt joined us, and he mentioned that he doesn't like the virtual background because it's distracting. So it can be distracting for some. What I would say is know your audience. So if you're in an organization where people are pretty buttoned up, you know, maybe not use the virtual background. I know folks like Nita love the virtual background. You know, she might have a beach behind her. Some people use the virtual background, but it's not it's not solid. Like, they blend with the background sometimes. So just be mindful that if you're using the virtual background, that it's not distracting. All right. Oh, Snigdha says the backlight also gives you a nice halo. Yeah, it's probably not well focused right now, but yeah, generally it just really separates you from what's behind, because I would be blending in with my bookshelf right now if it wasn't for the backlight. Okay, so let's talk about framing yourself in the camera. And again, I'm not going to take...
Yeah, I have a question and I thought I should just unmute and ask.
Please do. Thank you.
So you spoke about the backlight. Now, for instance, I don't have a backlight, but for people who have a more plain background, like I have a wall behind me, does that automatically add as that differentiating thing? Because see, I'm wearing a darker color and then that line already forms. So would you say that if that's not there, then you probably wear something that's different in color to set you?
That's it, exactly. So I was coaching one of the students who was in the Dingman pitch competition yesterday, and she was wearing a white blouse on the white background, right? So actually the technical term for it is a floating head. So you want to avoid the floating head look by making sure that your color that you're wearing is different from the color in the background. You're exactly right. Yep, that's it. So if you don't have a backlight, you can't, they call it a hairline. If you can't create that hairline, then just wear something that looks different from the background. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and the takeaway here is play. That's really the takeaway, is to play with your lighting. Don't just default. So Rohan, you have a great fill light coming in that looks like outdoor natural light. If you set up a lamp on the other side of you, you would look like you're professionally lit. Let's do it. Yeah, play with the lighting. Apurva, same thing. You could use another light. You look really dark, okay? Rachel, you look great. So you look really dark as well. So I would also suggest that you try to play with some lighting. All right. So there's two pieces here around framing. I don't have any slides on one of them. So the first piece is you want the camera, you want your computer to be at eye level with the video. For me, I have my computer actually raised up about 6 inches on some like plastic cubes that have pens and pencils in. So sometimes folks have the laptop right on the desk, and then the computer is looking up at your chin, right? So you want to just be at eye level with the computer, which means you have to have the computer raised up. So I actually have like an external keyboard that I use so that I'm not like reaching up to my laptop. The other piece is you don't necessarily want to be centered in the frame. You want to use what we call the rule of thirds. So the rule of thirds is this idea that if you align any piece of art or anything creative with a third of the screen, that it creates more tension, energy, and interest. So the rule of thirds is used, again, in photography, in creative fields. And the idea is that you don't necessarily center images. So you want to be like slightly off center in the frame. And it can be that you are slightly off center, or it could be that you have some sort of statement piece in the back, like a plant or a photo, some piece of art that is in the third of the screen. So again, the rule of thirds is imagine that your screen is a sheet of paper and you're to fold it into thirds, and you want to put the highlight, the focus of the frame in one of those thirds in the screen. Not necessarily flat and center. So flat and center isn't as dynamic, as interesting, as engaging as being off in the third. Okay, so let's move to the technology. Any final thoughts about lighting and framing and how to make yourself look beautiful on camera?
I have a quick comment.
Please.
There's also a zoom feature. If you have an HD webcam, you can beautify yourself. So it automatically adjusts the lighting on the webcam. You can play around with that a little bit.
How do you find that?
It is, hold on, I think it's somewhere in the settings.
Okay. I love
so,
it. I'm gonna put it on the list of things to play around with. So
yeah.
Yourself with this. Is it like a Snapchat filter? Like
no, it's not a filter. It just affects the lighting.
It's in the
okay.
settings. Touch.
Yeah, where is it?
Settings. Yeah, it's in video, I think. Settings, video.
And let me address a question that I just got from Rachel. Rachel, would you like me to address it now? Is that okay?
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's just something I'm thinking about because I don't have a nice desk like you have. And wherever you are.
And you know what's interesting is actually this morning I taught, I teach hot Pilates for a local yoga studio. And what I did is I just put my laptop up on a desk and then I put it on a box. Like, you know, the people that you're talking to can't see your jerry-rigged, you know, janky setup, right? So they don't have to know that, like, you have it on a music stand, like hanging off the edge of a kitchen counter, right? What matters is what they're seeing, right? So you just fake it kind of a little bit till you make it. And it might be uncomfortable for you, but this is really important when it comes to like interviews or if you're doing a presentation for your team, really things that are high stakes. Like put yourself, I had a job interview. I wanted to teach for the English department about 3 years ago, and I was in Vermont at my husband's aunt's house. And I set up my desk like behind the door, you know, of the bedroom. Like I was in like a 2-foot space. But I made it look like I had a beautiful office backdrop, if that makes sense. Like I moved everything in the room around. So I would just suggest like jerry-rigging and like focusing on whatever it is they're gonna see, making that look like it's really high quality. The laptop was like on the bed and I had moved the nightstand to be behind me and then put like a flower, you know, a vase on it. So let's talk about the Zoom tools, and once I show you this, it's gonna be like it's gonna change your access to what you can do in Zoom and really get you guys excited. So I'm gonna put another poll. Go ahead.
I had one follow-up question.
Yeah, please.
I mean, if I can just take that up right now, or if you want me to take that up.
Go ahead and ask.
So, I mean, like you talked about a 2 feet space, but that was temporary. So most of our internships have turned virtual. So in that kind of a scenario, when you need a permanent kind of a setup, and when you don't have any formal office space, like what do you suggest in those circumstances? And then it's not very easy to put it up like every time that temporary setup.
Yeah, I think you have to invest some time. Yeah, invest some time, invest some money in making it a space that that you can be in comfortably for a longer term, especially because the more and more, if you switch up your space, people will start to ask you about it and be concerned or confused. So once you set up your space, kind of use it consistently, unless you want to intentionally switch things up. But I have a good friend, she works remotely for Cognizant. She's in the Virgin Islands. And, you know, she had some challenges because she'd be by her brother's house, but sometimes she'd be at her mom's house and then she'd be at her place. And it almost became a distraction that people conference calls would be like, oh, where are you now? And she's like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to set up one place, you know, work from there so that this isn't a distraction for people.
Perfect. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's our new norm, right? It's our new reality, unfortunately. So we have to do our best. So have you ever used the Zoom waiting room? No. Okay, so y'all saw my waiting room set up. I'm going to show you how that works. And here's the plus of the waiting room is it gives you an opportunity as the presenter to like play with your slides, make sure you put them in presentation mode. Daksh and Rohan and I all talked. You know, I let them into the meeting before you all, and I said, okay, who's going to kick things off? Who's going to talk next? Okay, so it gave us an opportunity to meet before you all were here. And then I also added some questions there, like what pisses you off about the way people use Zoom, or so you can start thinking about what I want you to be thinking about when I bring you in here, right? Like I've primed your mind for this is what this meeting is going to be about. Put away your cell phone, put away all this other stuff. We're going to talk about Zoom now. So the waiting room is a really powerful function. It also prevents Zoom bombing, which is a problem that, and I'm sure you all have heard, is a security issue that Zoom is dealing with increasingly. The only downside of the waiting room is I have to keep checking it to make sure that no one is late and is sitting there. Sorry, you have to go, Snigdha, see you. You just have to keep an eye on it to make sure no one got kicked off and then is waiting to get let back into the waiting room. Breakout rooms are a little bit complicated. They take some time. I suggest playing with them. So what I did today is I grabbed my husband and I said, hey, here's this Zoom link. Call this. And we between all of our devices had 7 devices in the meeting, right? Like my cell phone, my Kindle, his iPad, his computer. So just take all of your devices, log them into a Zoom meeting and play with the functions so that you know how to do it before you're trying it in a really high stakes situation, or just try it now in your groups and team meetings so that you know how to do these effectively. And you may not have, a vision in your mind of how you do and use these things, but again, now is the time to be playing. All right, so here's the key to all of these fancy things in Zoom, is you have to enable them. So none of them are automatically available to you in Zoom until you, what do you see on my screen? Do you see my Zoom or do you see a PowerPoint?
We see the Zoom.
You see my Zoom, excellent. Okay, so you're gonna go to Zoom, you're gonna log into your Zoom account. The other thing I wanna say is make sure that you put a photo in your profile so that when you're not using your video, it's your LinkedIn photo, an attractive photo of you. And it's not just like the letter of your name if you haven't done that already. So you're gonna go to settings and do this with me now if you're able. You're gonna log in with your Smith account or whatever Zoom account you have. And then you have to enable a ton of stuff. So by default, like screen sharing is not enabled. So you need to allow screen sharing. There's a whiteboard function. That is something that you should definitely be using in your teams and groups. Enable your whiteboard. Breakout rooms, enable that. So turn that on, turn on breakout rooms. And the waiting room, again, you can turn that on. And then you can customize the title, logo, and description of the waiting room. So I can go here and I can say, I'll be right with you on another call, and then save it. Make sure you save it because I forgot to save after I updated this for my OCS workshop on Tuesday. And I just learned that today, right? So again, just play. And doing these things will really make you come across like, the technology, you're a pro, you're a resource for people in the organization. And then I just changed this text right here. So how are you? Today will be casual and informal. Please enable your camera, right? You can tell people that, and then you can change this to a picture, a logo, whatever logo you want it to be. Close it, and that's what your waiting room is gonna look like. And that waiting room will be enabled for any meeting that you schedule in Zoom. So we've enabled your waiting room, we've enabled your breakout rooms, we've enabled the whiteboard, we've enabled screen sharing. Let me find polling. And then let's enable polling. I searched for it because this is so many. I guess I passed it. So then also turn on and enable polling. Okay, so polling and the waiting room, you can access them when you schedule the meeting. So let's go to meetings, schedule the meeting. Meetings, let's say this is the IMBAA workshop. Let's go into that. So here, when I schedule the meeting, I added the poll. So I create the poll here. How are you? That's what I'm calling the poll. So let's say the question is, how are you? How are you? Good, sad, hungry. Okay, so that is your first question, and I've created a poll. And then when I go to launch the poll in Zoom, I can choose between these 3 polls that I've created. And you saw that I've already launched these 2. What's your Zoom proficiency? And you see I can see the answers here. And then why are you here? And then I just added this 3rd poll, how are you? And then from the Zoom platform, I can launch the poll. The way that breakout rooms work is we can also pre-create breakout rooms when we create a meeting, or we can do the breakout rooms actually in the Zoom meeting. So I'm going to show you a couple of slides to show you how to do that. So let me get back to my PowerPoint.
Tricia, I'm sorry, real quick, could you just jump through the first few settings that you ran through in the settings page? I missed a few of them.
Yeah, so actually I have a slide. So I enabled the waiting room, I enabled the polling, I enabled the breakout rooms, and I enabled the whiteboard. So those are 4 Zoom tools that I highly recommend you enable. The waiting room is a really great thing to enable because it helps with people just jumping into your phone call, what we call Zoom bombing. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so now let's look at the polling. I've launched polls twice now in this meeting, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time here. But what you will see is at the bottom of your screen, once you enable these things, you'll see a banner that allows you to launch them while you're in the meeting. So now let's look at breakout rooms. Just like at the bottom of your screen, there's a banner that has the polls. You also will now see breakout rooms once you've enabled it. So that's the key with all of this, is you have to enable it before you can play with it. So we've enabled it, and it can push people into breakout rooms manually or automatically. If you select automatically, so I know there are 10 people on this call, I can say, all right, assign participants into 3 rooms automatically, and I can let the system do it. Click, 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 pretty simple. I'm gonna show you how to manually do this, which is a little bit of a pain in the ass. And so play with it, learn how to do it. So if you say manually, you then have to create each breakout room. It gives you an option to name the breakout room. So for my workshop on Tuesday, I called one Tita's breakout room, Jingmei's breakout room, Neha's breakout room. You can change the name of what you call the breakout rooms. This you can do prior to the meeting or the presentation. And why breakout rooms? So breakout rooms, because nobody wants to be talked at for an hour or 90 minutes, right? You really want to give people an opportunity to engage. It's a way to have small group conversation. It's a way to leverage the knowledge of the people who are in your meeting or in your presentation and give them an opportunity to engage and participate. All right, so you rename the breakout rooms to whatever you want them to be. You just keep clicking add room to continue to create rooms. And then everyone who's in the meeting will show up. Like I told you, what I did is I just logged in with all of my devices in the house. You select each person's name, and then you assign them to each room. Now, one thing to think about here, which I don't know the answer to, but you can figure out, is while you're doing this, people are just kind of sitting on the call, right? So it's like, one moment while I push you into breakout rooms, maybe there's a slide you have up that they're looking at, or maybe you're playing music, or maybe there's some more points that you're hitting on what you're covering in your presentation. But just know that there's a moment here where you have to be multitasking, or just to tell folks, bear with me, this is gonna take about 45 seconds. We're gonna sit in a little silence while I push you into your breakout rooms. So that's about communicating to people what's happening. And not apologizing, right? Like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. Give me 1 second, I'm trying to figure this out. But like maintaining your confidence as you do this. When you assign people to breakout rooms, if you move someone to a room by mistake, you can always move them to a different room. So you just click on their name, and then it gives you the option to move them to a different breakout room. And then you select open all rooms. and people will get a notification that says the host is inviting you to join this breakout room. Now, it's important that you, on your end, know what other people are seeing. So this is where you tell people, all right, I've opened the breakout rooms. You should see a notification on your screen saying the host is inviting you to join XYZ breakout room. What's really cool about this is what the screen is going to look like for you as the host, is you can then hop around and join all the breakout rooms and see what's happening. You can just kind of float. And so this is what I did in the workshop on Tuesday. I listened to where people were. I sent messages to each of the breakout room hosts saying 2 more minutes, 1 more minute, 5 more minutes. You can also message everyone in all of the breakout rooms. So saying, start to wrap up your conversations. I'm going to close the rooms in a moment. And to bring people back, you're just going to hit close all the rooms. Once you hit close all the rooms, the default in Zoom is that people will be given 60 seconds to finish their conversation. And so they will see on their screens, breakout rooms will close in 30 seconds or breakout rooms will close in 60 seconds. So that's breakout rooms. Any questions about how these work or anything I've experienced or seen or noticed with breakout rooms or why you would use breakout rooms? Is this a function that you think you might use? So please unmute and just chat with me. So we've got polling, we've got breakout rooms, we've got the waiting room feature, we've got the whiteboard feature. Do you all see yourself playing with these, utilizing these tools?
I think it depends on the context.
Mm-hmm.
I could see if the sort of tone of a specific meeting and internship were a like brainstorming session, then something like breakout or even polling could be useful. For sure.
Yeah, it's a great way to like facilitate brainstorming, to facilitate, you know, design thinking, to get ideas from people, to get their perspective, you know, focus groups, interviews, that sort of thing, for sure. I mean, even in a training context, right? So say that you're brought onto a team and you're developing some new type of process or methodology. You might want to ask people, okay, how are you currently doing XYZ? I'm going to push you guys into breakout groups. I want you to talk to each other and come up with a list of ways that you're doing blah, 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 right? And then when we come back, we're going to debrief and talk about that. So really just, you know, my advice to you is to just not be limited by how static and two-dimensional our lives are becoming, and to try to get creative and to bring creativity into the way that you facilitate meetings, into the way that you even do your presentations, right? There's an annotation tool. You can annotate on your PowerPoint while you talk. Just set up another device that you can write on. How can you be creative and show that you're not afraid of technology, and that, you know, you are flexible in the way that you think and the way that you utilize the software? Any other questions about using the polling feature or the breakout rooms? I think polls are a really great way to get a temperature of people in the room, right? How many of you are familiar with this language? How many of you know this term, XYZ? One of the things that I sort of had, yes, you can only do this if you are the host. That's a great question, Silvana. Can you only do this if you're the host? And so I interrupted myself. I forgot where I was. But here's what I'm thinking that I want to say is about this being the host. That's a phenomenal question. So for those of you who have virtual interviews, right, and have a presentation for that interview, if you know you want to utilize or use or do any of these functions, touch base with the HR person who's setting it up for you and ask them if they can make you a co-host, or ask them if you can host the meeting, like if you can send them the link so that you're the one who has all of these settings enabled. I've had people like talk to the HR person before the meeting to say, okay, make sure that you have share screen enabled. Make sure XYZ so that you're not troubleshooting during your interview, and you have access to present your PowerPoint. Even if it's just presenting your PowerPoint, like some organizations may just not even have the share screen enabled, and you have to talk to the HR person, because I don't know why HR is like such a mess everywhere. But sometimes you have to make sure that you're planning ahead and you're taking control of what all of the function is that you wanted to do and use in the meeting. Okay, and so I want to share one last thing with you about norms and communicating. And that is a resource that I have in a Google Drive for you all. So I created this handout called Leveraging Technology, where there are best practices for enabling video and audio, making sure the camera is even with your eyes, making eye contact with the web camera. So not looking at faces on the screen, but looking at the camera itself to give the illusion that you're making eye contact with people, using headphones, the lighting setup that we've talked about, thinking about your internet connection. But these last set of questions here around norms and how do you set and communicate norms for meeting engagement and participation? What do you need to communicate to people beforehand, right? If you're the meeting owner, please be ready to have your cameras enabled. This is going to be an engaging, interactive session. Or, you know, just here's the Zoom link, but we're just going to have a phone call. No need to enable your cameras. Whatever it is you want the tone of the meeting to be, making sure that you set that up front. So for instance, on today's webinar, I said, you know, this is really casual, informal. I want this to be a conversation. Just unmute your audio if you want to talk to me. You know, or do you want to tell people, please save questions for the end? Do you want to disable the chat function, you know, while you're presenting so that you're able to focus? Or do you want to tell people, please don't send chat messages to everyone, just send messages directly to me so that folks don't get distracted? But making sure that you are clear on all of these norms and that you communicate them either before the meeting or during the meeting. That really gives people the impression that, you know, you're in control. This is your presentation. This is your meeting. And it alleviates discomfort for them in not knowing how to engage. If people don't know how to engage, then they just will disconnect and disengage. So tell people what to expect. Tell them how to communicate with you. That can be, you know, the tone of the meeting, the energy, whether it's formal, whether it's informal, whether it's interruptible, whether you want videos on, and again, whether or not you want them to comment in the chat function, or you just want them to raise their hand. Just, hey, I'm looking at you all on the Brady Bunch view, so I can see all of your beautiful faces. If you have something to say, just raise your hand, right? So just make sure that you communicate clearly to people how you want them to engage. In closing, my last points for you all are to explore and play. Really explore and play. This is your time. This, you know, while we didn't plan for this current virtual environment, it's the way the world has been moving. You know, a quarter of people were already working remotely. Teams are increasingly global, right? I know people who work with teams in the Philippines and teams in India and you know, all time zones, all virtual. Really lean into this. Lean into it, as disappointing as it is, and learn the tools. Don't just learn Zoom, learn WebEx, learn Google Teams, Microsoft Teams, learn Skype, become proficient with them, set up accounts with all these different platforms, and play and explore the full potential of the technology. So thank you all. Any other questions? That's all I got for you. Everything that I've shared today is available at this link, bit.ly/bizcom2020. I also sent it in the newsletters that I've been sending. It's a massive folder called Strategic Storytelling Resources. And within that, there's a folder called Leveraging Technology. My slides from today will be there. I will upload the video from today's webinar. I will also, the handout is there. There's a handout on the 3-point lighting setup. And then I think there's another handout on breakout rooms and polls and leveraging the technology. Have fun, play with this stuff. I know.
Thank you so much, Trisha, for
it's
today.
It's a total bummer.
It was really useful. So thank you so much.
Great.
Bye.
That's good to hear.
Thank you, Tracy.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.